Good evening, all of you. Today we have yet another session of the reading class organized by the NIAS Consciousness Studies program. This forum focuses on discussing very exciting ideas which is in the cutting edge in today's contemporary world, connecting science, philosophy, biology, and I should also say perhaps bioinformatics, considering today's topic. Today's speaker is Harikrishnan NB, a young scholar, research scholar at this program who finished his MTech, and he is going to speak on a very interesting topic relating to machine intelligence. And I would request Professor Nitin Nagaraj, his mentor and supervisor, to introduce Harikrishnan.
Yeah, thank you very much. So welcome to the reading class presentation by Mr. Harikrishnan. So Mr. Harikrishnan is a research associate with the Consciousness Studies program, and his areas of interest are in artificial intelligence and machine intelligence. He has a master's from Amrita University at Timadai campus in the areas of machine learning. And here he is focusing on AI, and today he's going to talk on a very important topic called the Turing Test. Now, Alan Turing, we all know, is the father of computers, and he came up with this notion of a Turing Test, and we'll learn more about it from Harikrishnan. So over to you, Hari.
Thank you, Sangeeta ma'am and Nitin sir, for the warm introduction. And so today's topic is Turing Test, an imitation game to determine machine intelligence. So if you see this topic, there are three important terms which might be foreign for you. That is Turing Test, imitation game, and machine intelligence. So what I thought to do today is to try and explore what exactly we mean by Turing Test, an imitation game, and we will try to touch upon some aspects of intelligence in machine intelligence. So let's get started. So first and foremost question we need to ask is, who is Alan Turing? He's a mathematician, computer scientist, World War II code breaker, father of modern computer science, and one of the founding fathers of artificial intelligence and whatnot. So this World War II code breaker, so that is very important in the history, when we see the history. So after World War I, Germans have built a machine called Enigma to encode the messages. So for about 20 years, they have been trying to improve the technology, and in World War II, they introduced that technology. And all the German messages were encoded, encrypted. And it was very difficult to break Enigma because the configurations were changing each and every time. So Alan Turing and his HUT-8 team has developed a machine called BOMBE to decrypt these messages. And because of that, and historian says that if this machine was not there, the war would have extended for 2 more years, and 2 million lives will be lost. Another 2 million lives will be lost. And that was an important contribution of Alan Turing to the world, to the World War II. So let us try to go to the childhood of Alan Turing. Let us see how he was and try to understand a little bit. So this, in the leftmost you are seeing Alan Turing, and the right side you are seeing Christopher Morcom, and this is a notebook. When they were supposed to do French, they were doing these kinds of stuff. So these are the notes and crosses they do in the French classes. And here you can see they discuss about astronomy. And here you can see they were seeing the Euclidean parallel axis theorem. So they were in a world of mathematics, physics, and a world of beauty. And this friendship has a lot of significance in Alan Turing's life. So Alan Turing developed a strong attachment towards Christopher. So there are certain other aspects I should tell, because India and Alan Turing's family has a great relation. Alan Turing's father actually spent most of his life in India. His father was an Indian civil service officer, and his mother was born in Podanur, Sarah Turing, born in Podanur, Tamil Nadu. And her father was one of the chief engineer of Madras Railway. And there are a lot of history, so there are a lot of interesting stuff regarding that, but we cannot go into all. So let us limit to what we need to focus on. So what happens is, like, this strong attachment developed a crush on Christopher. Alan Turing developed a crush on Christopher. And suddenly Christopher died in 1930 because of tuberculosis. This grief deeply affected Turing, and he investigated the questions of consciousness. What exactly is consciousness? What happens when someone dies? What happens to the mind of that person? So this grief immersed himself to study more about physics, biology, mathematics. He was fully into that, quantum mechanics. Maybe, I don't know, this is my speculation, maybe that also has a contribution to what the work that he has done on intelligence. Maybe, I don't know, maybe. So some of the, and later in his life, he has gave some of the seminal works of Turing's are Turing Machine, Turing Test, and just Turing Thesis. These three works, no, there are many more are there, but these three works particularly revolutionized the field of computer science. So why we call science, why should we call computer science as science? That is because of Turing's famous work. So, and sadly, in 1952, there was a break open in Turing's house, and on investigation, what the officers found that Turing revealed that he had a homosexual relationship with one of the people, and that at that time homosexuality was a criminal offense in England, and so either he has to take, as a consequence of that, either he has to take imprisonment or he has to do chemical castration. So he took the later one. He did chemical castration in 1954. He was poisoned to death. Whether it is a suicide or not, we don't know still. We don't have an idea. We don't have a confirmed report whether it is suicide or not. But there was a half-bitten apple next to him, which was poisoned by cyanide. So what, as a result of that, what we lost a great personality who revolutionized the computer science society. And in 2009, the British Prime Minister then apologized to what the government has done to Turing's life. So that time they realized, after 50 years, they realized the importance of Turing, the contributions. So this talk, so we will be focusing on Turing Test. So we will try to understand what exactly Turing Test. We'll go very slowly in understanding that. So Alan Turing, in his famous paper called Computing Machinery and Intelligence, tried to ask a very famous question: can machines think? But if you directly ask this question to public, people people have different opinions. So taking a statistical opinion won't be of much use. So instead, he framed it in a different way, and that is called imitation game. So imitation game is a game played between three participants: a man, a woman, and an interrogator. And they are all separated. There is no means of communication other than a teletype. That means there is no verbal, they cannot touch each other, nothing. There is only, the communication is only possible through a teletype. So what the role of interrogator is, interrogator will ask a set of questions to both man and woman. And he has to determine which one of them is man and which one of them is woman. So now we will make the rules and we will try to explain the rules of this game. So what are the goals of man? The goal of man is to try and confuse the interrogator that he is a woman. So when I ask the question like how long is your hair? My hair has 9 inches long. So he can give such answers. And the role of woman is to convince the interrogator that I am a woman. That is to help the interrogator to give the right answer. But there is of no use, right? If the woman can say I am a woman, he is a man, so don't trust him. Even the man can make such similar claims. So that's of no much use. Now what happens if we replace man by a machine? Can the machine imitate the normal sense, the behavior of a human? Is it possible? That's the question we are interested in. So that is called the imitation game. Whether a machine can imitate what a human does, the way of thinking, all these kinds of stuff. So one thing you can see, when I say something that acts intelligently is intelligent, that is what you have to derive from this. Something that acts intelligently is intelligent. That is something inherent in this game. Okay. So we'll have a debate. We'll discuss more about that. So that is one of the hypotheses of weak AI. Something which can act intelligently is intelligent. Sorry, that is a strong AI hypothesis. I will come to that. So the machine is there. So can the machine fool the interrogator? So that is the main aim of this imitation game. So let us try to understand that. So what kind of machines are concerned in this game? This is very important to understand. So these are kind of the assumptions involved in this test. So machines, so we wish to permit every kind of engineering techniques. Then the second point is very important, that is very applicable in today's world. Machines which work but whose manner of operations cannot be satisfactorily described by its constructors because they have applied a method which is largely experiment. This is happening in the current AI. We use deep learning, all these stuffs. It gives result, but nobody knows why. Because it has applied a procedure which is largely experiment. And the third one, we exclude from the machines men born in the usual manner. So that we exclude. And last one, the kind of machines we are involved is digital computer. So for the people here from other background, Turing has given a very good analogy for digital computers. So let us try to understand a human computer. He uses human computer to try to explain digital computer. So when I say human computer, there is a human, there is unlimited supply of paper, and there is a set of rules. So a human using unlimited supply of paper doing some calculation. That's the human computer does. Now he has used the same analogy to explain digital computer. So there is something called store, executive unit, control unit. The store is analogous to the paper here and the rules. And the executive unit will execute each actions, maybe to add, maybe to subtract, maybe, so whatever the actions it is supposed to do. And the control will ensure that whether the actions are done properly. So this is the analogy he gives. So having said this, so let us see what Turing believed. In 50 years' time, it will be possible to program computers with a storage capacity of 10 raised to 9 to make them play the imitation game so well that an average interrogator will not have more than 70% chance of making the right decision or right identification after 5 minutes of questioning. That means if you question the machine, you have given only 5 minutes. If 30% of the time if you fail, then the machine has passed the Turing test. The machine has actually fooled the interrogator. And there are very interesting steps going on. There is every year there is a competition called Loebner. They will give Loebner prize, which passes the test. But there has been a lot of modification over the years it came. So that one we'll try to highlight. So just a moment. So let us see whether we are on the same level. So for example, we understood what is Turing test. Now, one question that came to my mind is why trying to give human-like response is a sign of intelligence? So animals, are they intelligent? They are also intelligent, right? So why don't a human-like response? Okay, maybe we understand humans better than animals. Maybe, I don't know. So let's try to discuss all these kind of questions. Is there a difference between intelligence and human intelligence? Or is there a difference? These are open questions. We will discuss all these stuffs. And will the Turing test limit the growth of AI to only human intelligence? So that is also some interesting questions that people are discussing. So let's see the contrary views. So there are several objections. There are several views that Turing has identified in the paper, and he tries to give his explanation to that. So one is theological objection. So theological objection is very interesting. So but the one that is highlighted in the bold, right? We will discuss more about that, but I will just touch upon some of these. Theological objection. So what it means actually, God has given soul to man and woman, not to animals and machine. So Turing clearly states in his paper that I cannot accept any part of this. He clearly says, and he gives a theological answer to this. He responded theologically. So if you define God as omnipotent and omniscient, then if you are restricting the God's omnipotence by saying that means God cannot give souls to machine. That means in a way you are restricting the omnipotence of God. But people can also ask, okay, why maybe the God may not have interest towards, maybe God is not interested in that. But one answer I felt, what I felt is that maybe is interest, then that means God, you are associating psychology with the properties of God. Is that axiom involved in the definition of God? That we had to see. I don't know. Yeah. So next is the argument from consciousness. I thought this would be very interesting. So the question is like, not only write, okay, this is very interesting. Not until a machine can write a sonnet or compose because of thoughts and emotions felt and not with a chance fall of symbols, could we agree that machine equals brain? That is, not only write it, but know that it has written it. Basically, it is self-aware. So if I have written something, I should be aware of that. So now the question is like, how can I be sure that Abhishek is conscious or Abhishek is aware of what he is doing? The only way I can be aware is that I have to be Abhishek, right? So this is a kind of solipsism. So my mind and me exist. So here you can see two people arguing. I am conscious and I can think, but you are not. This is exactly what is happening in solipsism. And so other person is saying, no, I am conscious, you are not. So how do you tackle this issue? But in the real world, I am not considering like that. I consider Abhishek is conscious. He's able to think. So in the real world, we actually compromise. So but why can't we do that in the case of machine? That is something interesting. And the only way to do that is like I have to be a machine. To be 100% sure that a machine is not thinking, I have to be a machine, right? I have to be a machine and think from that point of view. So the mathematical objections. So Gödel is a great mathematician. So Gödel has, in his Gödel's famous theorem, incompleteness theorem, Gödel has stated that in any axiomatic system, there are statements which is inherently true, but which cannot be proved true within the system. That is, just in philosophy, there is something called part trying to understand the whole. It is something like that. So Turing accepts this argument. Turing says that yes, that is possible. That what you said is absolutely correct. Turing accepts what Gödel is saying, but Turing also says that who knows whether the mind is also having limitation. There is no proof that our intellect has a limitation or not. There is no proof of that. Maybe our intellects may have limitations. So Turing identifies this in this paper. Then Lady Lovelace's objection. So Lady Lovelace is very interesting. So do you know who is the first programmer? Anybody? Lady Lovelace is the first programmer, first computer programmer. Ada Lovelace, yeah, first computer programmer. So she has raised the argument that, her argument, the analytical engine. So Charles Babbage, she worked with Charles Babbage. So the analytical engine has no pretensions to originate anything. It can do whatever we know how to order it to perform. This is a kind of inductive reasoning. For example, at that time it was true. At that time, from her observation, it was true, but not today. It has changed. So Turing says that this observation is valid at that time, but this doesn't mean that in future we cannot build a machine which can do creative things. And that has, in the test of time, has proved that. So we have now different machines are able to do several creative things. The test of time has proved that. Now the argument from extrasensory perception, telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition. So this many of the scientists may negate it, but there is a statistical evidence for this. People have come up with statistical evidence for telepathy. Now, so Turing's response is interesting. Suppose, let's play the imitation game. Suppose the interrogator is having a deck of cards, and interrogator is asking both the computer, both the machine as well as the human, to which deck the card belongs to. Maybe the human is kind of a telepathic receiver. He's able to receive that. So maybe, okay, then because of that, out of 400 cards, let's take 400 cards for time being, 130 times the human tells the correct answer, but the machine only tells 103. So then, then the human, then he identifies which is human and which is machine. But imagine a machine is having a random number generator. So there is a possibility that the machine can give more correct answers. So in that sense, interrogator will again be confused, right? So this need not be a real reason for a test of intelligence, this telepathy or clairvoyance or whatever. Now, this is another criticism by Robert M. French, but this criticism happened much later after the work of Turing. So he says that in his article Subcognition and the Limits of Turing Test, Turing Test is too demanding. It provides a guarantee not of intelligence, but of culturally oriented human intelligence. We will try to understand this by an analogy. So what is culturally oriented human intelligence? And Turing's test could be passed by things that experience the world as we have experienced it. So this is something very interesting. So let us try to understand by an example what it actually mean. So there are two philosophers who are doing their philosophy chat, evening philosophy chat. So let us assume the only non-flying animals known to the inhabitants of large Nordic islands are seagulls. So the first philosopher asked, see, what is the essence of flying? What do you mean by flying? The essence of flying is to move through the air. So the second philosopher told, okay, that's interesting. So what about tossing a pebble? What about clouds moving? What about soap bubble? Is that flying? Do you call it as flying? Oh, then the other philosopher thought for quite some time. Okay, maybe it involves having some wings, feathers. Interesting. So the other second philosopher thought, okay, let's agree that the flight has something to do with being airborne, physical features such as features, beaks, and hollow bones, etc. So now they thought, okay, let us design something called Seagull Test for flight. It is a test for flight. So luckily they know about Alan Turing's work. So that's why they come up with this test. So they developed this test. Okay, so somebody came and told, I have invented a machine that can fly. So see whether it passes the Seagull test. So you have a flying machine, Seagull, interrogator. There is no wonder if helicopter doesn't pass this test, because here the characteristics of flight has been determined by the characteristics of this Seagull. So that is what he was trying to tell, what is going to be culturally oriented intelligence. So what we are having is not a test for flight, but rather a test for flight as practiced by seagulls. Similarly, what we are having right now is not a test for intelligence at all. It's a test for intelligence as practiced by human. So what he tries to say is that instead of having a test, we need a theory of intelligence. That is the most important thing. That's what he highlights in the paper. But there are many more criticism to this works, to Turing's work. But what I believe is, like, it is a starting point. It is a starting point because we have to start from somewhere, right? So Turing's test was a starting point, but over time we have to develop. We have to add new features to it. That's what I think we have to do. And this book, there are 2 volumes. There's the first volume. There are machines and thought. So there are a lot of criticisms and extensions of Turing's work. So interested people, you can go through this. Now there is a famous confusion regarding, did Eugene Gustman pass the Turing test? This is a chatbot which simulated a 13-year-old Ukrainian boy Now, there was so there's a report like Can Machines Think, a report on Turing Test experiments of the Royal Society. So out of 30 judges, 10 judges were fooled by this chatbot. But many people won't consider it has passed the Turing test. Why? Because it passed in a different way. It tried to confuse the interrogator. But that is one way of arguing. But there's a paper where you can read and see. So many of the answers are a little bit confusing. Instead of giving a direct answer, it was trying to confuse. But anyway, that is interesting. What they have is interesting. So I thought this is something thought from Pratyabhijna interpretation of Ardhanarishwara. It may be completely foolish. My understanding of philosophy is very limited, but I thought it would be fun to see that. So I thank Shankar sir also for this interpretation. So we have this Ardhanarishwara. So from Pratyabhijna point of view, so we have the Shiva and Shakti. Shiva represents consciousness and Shakti represents potency. So consciousness is always potent. We cannot separate potency from consciousness. So that means according to Pratyabhijna, consciousness has a potency to become Hari. Consciousness has a potency to become this object Mike. So maybe consciousness has the potency to become a machine also. Who knows? So what we can do is like we can wait for the test of time and to know really what happens. So I thank TATA Trust project and NIAS Consciousness Studies program for giving me this opportunity. And also, so some of these questions, we will discuss some of these questions, what is true intelligence. So in this talk, you have observed that I have never defined intelligence. So that is quite open. So let us discuss and come to some consensus, maybe. Let's see. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hari. I think it was a very captive presentation, and you covered quite a bit of ground, a lot of new things for me as well. I think, as you rightly said, how do you define intelligence and the nature of intelligence, and is it something like the Seagull's test of flight kind of an intelligence that we are trying to define? So I think this floor is now open for questions, discussions, comments.
Maybe I will start with the intelligence. Let me. So let us take an organism embedded in this world. So frankly, we cannot separate the organism from the world. So now the organism has to cope up with the environment. So first thing is that organism has to know the environment, knowing the environment. So what does knowing the environment mean? Knowing the environment means understanding the data it gets from the environment and draw fruitful conclusions so that it can take wise decisions to survive. That's the first basic thing. Now what all things it involves? It involves identifying objects, object detection, identifying different objects. It involves movement. It also involves communication. So I think this aspect is common among humans and animals. That is what I guess. This is my take on intelligence. Maybe something more we can add to it, or we can negate also, no problem.
Today only I was reading a paper. It's debate about what is the difference between being a human and human being.
Human being. Oh, nice. Okay.
So this paper, this like somehow similarly asking the same question. When you say that you are an intelligent human being, what qualities you assert with the intelligent human beings, or how it differentiates between an animal, that when you say the human being, not being a human. Apart from that, you understand that like being human is a quality.
Okay.
Or what is a condition? When you take the human beings as a species. Okay. Then the question comes that how can you associate this quality in a similar way? I think when they say the machine. Then the author come with the two qualities. There could be many n number of qualities. Is the power of language for the communication. Basically the communication, and another is the rational thinking.
Rational thinking.
So these two qualities differentiate between what being a human or human being with the animal, what is the world of animality. So in that sense, we can say that here in the question of when the organism has to survive in this world, and who all other things know and how it differentiates between a machine will survive in this world. So I'll tell you these two things will be more like the primary concern. Then we can develop another things for the further discussion on this.
What about emotional things?
See, emotion, then you cannot say the animals community has also being an animal community, I will say that human beings are also belongs to the animal community if you go a larger level. But this emotions are everywhere. If you like the co-bird or the couple birds, one will die. So in sense of Chakor, if anybody is aware of that. She used to sing like they in night to call their mate in the night. So the emotions are there. So emotions, I not think there is a primary concern. The primary concern is the language. Though somebody told us the animals have also their language, but when it comes to the communication level, the rational thinking and the language is the primary concern.
Okay.
They communicate. So the surviving also we should need, like these two things are remembered like the essential for language and the communication skill.
Hari, it was really a nice presentation. I mean, like a very enlightening presentation because all the three terms were new to us, and we really appreciate that you took each word and explained it in a very layman term. I mean, you did use your scientific words, but then it was so we could at the end of the day I could go ahead with a take-on message.
Okay.
And as an answer for it, intelligence. Okay, I'll just start off with intelligence.
Okay.
I'm just telling out of the theories that I've read. Intelligence started off with general, specific intelligence and all of it. Now psychology itself is broadening up with 7 or 8 types of intelligence.
Oh.
Emotional intelligence being one of them.
Okay.
We will have to consider emotional intelligence because as a part of human, first of all, when they define intelligence, it is more like is a person being able to solve a mathematical problem or aptitude problem. That's how they started off initially. Later on, they went to understand the visual intelligence, kinesthetic intelligence, and all of it. Now we are currently standing on emotional intelligence. We are trying to understand emotional maturity and intelligence. If anyone who's able to understand that aspect and try to incorporate or try to reflect upon it in a much better way, then I think that was like more like an answer to you. Emotional intelligence is also important, not only rational thinking and intelligence so far, like after all the researches and all of it.
Hari, first of all, thank you for an excellent lecture. It was very clear, passionate, and convincing. My thoughts, they are not questions, these are kind of more thoughts. I think for Turing, and maybe for us who are discussing Turing test here, the idea of intelligence is a very comprehensive idea. It is not the age-old idea of intelligence of calculating or just computing. So what I think, as she said, it includes multiple levels of intelligence, if I may put. So I was just wondering, if at all we replace the word intelligence and just put consciousness, how would it make a difference? Because consciousness has multiple capabilities embedded within it.
Okay.
And different kinds of judgments, interpretations, conclusions are actually expressions of a conscious being.
Yeah.
And this might be a wrong epithet, but since lack of other better words, the degree of consciousness sometimes is different in different people. Just as we might say the degree of intelligence is different in different people. So what I feel is it's an exciting problem, and it may become much more complex as we go on. But I think it's also time to look at the whole issue in the context of consciousness, because the manner in which we are using the word intelligence itself has evolved. As it was used by Turing, or even before that, and now in the contemporary context. It includes a lot of human experiences, human expressions, fragilities, and so on. So putting consciousness will bring in the idea of awareness. It will also give the additional factor of agency to intelligence, without which intelligence would be just a function. But it becomes a capability when an agent is there, a conscious agent is there. So I feel the contextualization of consciousness will make the idea of intelligence, at least in the context of the Turing test and artificial intelligence, much more exciting and much more comprehensive. That's my feeling, but I don't know really.
I guess I am one of the unconscious people here. I walked in. When I saw your title for presentation, I've been trying to work on the dangers of artificial intelligence, especially the Deepfakes, which are trying to fool, first of all, the people. More importantly, when we have this machine vision that is going to guide the automatic driverless cars, etc. There are very subtle kind of changes that can be made to the signboards, etc., that can really cause havoc.
Yes.
So I was thinking you are going to talk about
Yes.
deepfakes, but I also learned something listening to you. This could be one method, one angle through which you can look at solving that problem, because it's a very tough problem. It's a very involved problem, and to detect a deepfake is much more difficult than to create a deepfake. But all the best.
Thank
It was an excellent talk.
So what you said is a very valid. Deepfakes today has been not only, and also in pornography industry also people are using deepfake. And also, and adversarial neural networks are one of the major problems today. So what you said is a very valid point in today's AI.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for the very nice presentation, because I learnt a lot in that. And just want to say, because this is one of Turing and artificial intelligence is one of also the central theme which is discussed in philosophy of mind. So just this is not a question, just I wanna think with you. So just picking up what Professor Sangeeta Menon has just mentioned about this relationship between this the intelligence and computation. So one of the critique of artificial intelligence as thought by Alan Turing is came from the phenomenology. So that especially from the Hubert Dreyfus. So what he fundamentally points out at the problem in this about the project of artificial intelligence is he says because it is based on the mathematical model. It believes that human responses can be represented in the mathematical or in the form of the algorithm. So this is what he calls as the representational thinking. So he argues from the point of view of phenomenology, especially from Heidegger and Merleau-Ponty, that basically humans' involvement, how the human involvement is basically based on the coping. So when we engage with the objects in the words, so we don't do the representational thinking. He says that, for example, I am taking this mic and speaking to you, so I am involved in this. So, or I am driving the car, so I am already involved in that. So, if I become a very skilled performer, then I don't represent the rule, I just go on with that. So, it helped me to involved in the word. So, which he says, so that is he called as the coping. So that the skill, when we generate the skill, so we don't the representational model. So which he says is missing in the artificial intelligence, because human beings are embodied, and when I come to say, he gives the example, if I come to this class, so I already know where I have to sit, so I don't need to represent the rule. So any performer who is very skillful performer, say Kathak dancer or whatever, so they actually, when they are performing very deeply, so they are totally involved in that, and that becomes very natural and kind of innate to them. So in fact, remembering the rules at that time on the rule-based thinking will be hindrance to their skillful performance. So that is what they say, that is how this model, he says, is basically based on this kind of the subject-object divide. So that is one of the argument they say. And second is, of course, I think we have discussed about the John Searle's experiment of this, again the Turing is about the Chinese room experiment. So this Chinese room experiment, if you provide some person in a room the manual, English manual, and some questions into the Chinese. So by the help of the English manual, he is able to translate, give the right answer. So he says, but ability to give the right answer does not mean that he understands the Chinese. Exactly. So he said intelligence involves the understanding. Which right answer can't provide. So these are one. So I think that might also we can discuss.
Yeah. So one thing about what you said, understanding. So see, in today's world, we are using a lot of deep learning and machine learning algorithms. These algorithms, what you said, actually it will work perfectly, but we don't have a clear understanding. We ourselves don't know whether it really understands the features. What is it exactly learning? What features it is exactly extracting? Why it is learning those particular features? So those answers, we don't have an answer as of now. So we have a long way to go to really answer, to find out, and also since there is no fundamental theory for deep learning, it is very difficult to answer many of the questions.
Just sort of a counterpoint to what you said, just a counterpoint. many times Ramanujan, right, he would say that he knew something, but he didn't know why or how he knew it. And but we don't say that he is not intelligent. I mean, we say it's intuition or some divine revelation, you know. So I don't know whether being able to formulate that how I know something. The question is, I get your point, the Chinese room, I understand what you're saying, that is true, but the problem is, where do you draw the line? Somebody like Ramanujan is probably the other extreme, I mean, right, like he probably understands it in a much deeper way, he sees some patterns, or there's a deeper understanding, which you can't explain at a different level, with language or logic, you know, he's not able to explain it, but he can see patterns, and people are still trying to figure out what he's saying, you know, and they're true, I mean, they're applicable to black holes, they're applicable to genomics, and so you see the problem here, no? That language and ability to understand, it's very tricky actually. Where do you draw the line, you know?
Actually, as far as I understand that the point of the drivers is that, because of course when there is a theoretical problem, so he says, well, we need to see that what is the difference between, he's not criticizing that machine can be very intelligent, they can be highly functional, but he said, but there is a fundamental difference between the human intelligence and the machine intelligence, and his point is that because human being is the embodied being. So so he says, because they are embodied, so whenever they interact with the world, so even before representing something as the rule, they directly get into that because of the practices they have in their culture. So for example, if somebody is driving a car, so after when he acquired the skill, so when the good driver is only that who need not to remember the rules all the time, or good performer is that who need not to involve what are the steps in the classical music I need to perform, because he totally engrossed in that. So that is he called as a kind of, he gives the name coping actually, because then larger argument is that because human beings wants to be, because the existence is an issue for them, they want to be something in the life. So that is why every activity is basically fundamentally which help in this realizing their being. So they totally get into that. So only he says that only when the things doesn't work out actually through our practical coping. So I might come across something that I'm using this mic and somehow it doesn't work and I'm not able to properly function with that. Then it become a theoretical object for me. Then I will look at it as a theoretical problem, why it has happened. Now I need to do that. So this is something I don't know, you will be able to tell more properly, that it is something I can very vaguely compare it with this Kuhn's structure of scientific revolution, paradigm shift. Because one paradigm when doesn't work at all, then you change the paradigm. Then that problem is, because if that paradigm is working on, then you don't change the paradigm. So this might be loud thinking, but the basic point is this, that human intelligence is something which requires the coping because of their embodied and being engrossed in culture. So which they think the machine can't do that actually. Machine can be highly functional, but machine can't cope with that. So one of this, but this is still debatable.
Thank you, Professor Nitin and Dr. Saurabh, for these questions. Some loud thoughts are coming to my mind. Well, this test and any text is conceived by a human mind, right? So the whole scenario is actually already predefined by a human mind, and whatever the qualities which are unique to a human mind are already attributed to that test. And then it is within that context you're distinguishing between what could be a machine or a non-human intelligence and human intelligence, right? Yeah. The whole design and conception has come from a human mind. Yeah, so whatever the attributes of the way of thinking by an individual is already coloring that particular design. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is there's already a bias, a degree of bias, which is a human bias. Yeah. So I think that is something which is very important to keep in mind. And number two, I was saying, again, I wanted to repeat what I just said earlier. Here, though we are using the word intelligence, we are not using that word just to talk about arriving at a conclusion or making an interpretation, but it's actually several levels of judgments and strategic thinking which is involved. That is why, you can fool someone or confuse someone so that you divert the attention of the other person so that he or she wouldn't be led into in a logical fashion to think in a certain manner. So again, here we are using intelligence, I feel, as a placeholder, more or less, than really what I feel is intelligence is like or maybe let me put it together. What we could mean by intelligence, at least in a traditional context, can be put in just in a cup. Okay. But I think today what we are talking about in this context of text and interpreting, it's much more than what that cup can hold. So I'm not even sure whether we are talking about just the function of intelligence. So it's more a capability, and a capability means a lot of other human attributes will come into it. Emotion, of course, is there. Yeah. Linguistic intelligence is there. Kinesthetic intelligence is there. But then again, we are using the word intelligence because as a culture, again, I think influenced by the Cartesian and the Baconian paradigm, we always want to keep intelligence as the most important capability. But how about strategic thinking? How about including the ability to include more and then reach a conclusion? How about being empathic to a person and thus understand that person's mind? So I also have a feeling that this whole scenario of discussion in artificial intelligence is still built in the Baconian and Cartesian understanding of intelligence, which may not be the case if we look at some of the Eastern traditions like Indian philosophy, where the whole idea of buddhi is a very functional aspect, because we have discussions on levels of awareness, consciousness as separate from, not separate or at least more than awareness, and there definitely a distinction between what is body, what is mind, and mind itself is analyzed in different levels, for example in the Yoga Sutra by Patanjali. Then we also have a different mechanism called chitta, which is a combination of ego-making mechanism and memory. So I feel there's a whole lot of nuanced thinking perhaps happening more in a much older philosophies. I'm not saying that we are not saying anything new, but I feel there's much more comprehensiveness and more attunement to the nuances in those philosophies. And I feel these tests are in a limited context, but we are trying to put all new things into that limited square. That's why I said I think it is still a cup, and we are trying to put a lot of in the cup, and the cup is definitely overflowing. And therefore we are considering all those questions are, unsolvable, or it's a riddle and so on. But I feel if the placeholder can be changed, rather than a cup, you have a much larger holder. So what I mean is larger than just talking about intelligence as a function, but then had to relate to all this. If you bring in the idea of consciousness, maybe the holder will be much more, and we might come into better insights, I feel.
Yeah, I thought what you just said now, it just triggered me a thought. So one thought I had was, when we say that I'm self-aware, that's already some kind of intelligence, because I'm trying to separate the self from the not self. So being self-aware already is distinguishing between the self and the not self. There seems to be, so we can't separate awareness with intelligence, I'm saying, at least that basic level of intelligence. Because otherwise, what does it mean to say I'm self-aware? It is...
Can I respond to it? Then again, I think, so when I say I am self-aware, it is a statement.
I mean, the experience of that, I'm saying.
Yeah, the experience is expressed in a statement. The experience is internal. A statement is a representation or a kind of an articulation of that. No, so what you are trying to say is, in order to articulate or to recapitulate in terms of a string of words and a language.
I'm saying even to recognize that I am this and I'm not that. I mean, in experience, I'm saying, not in formulation. In experience, to say that I am this and I'm not that, that seems to be some kind of, what would you call that? It's a power of awareness? Or?
Yeah, so when I say I am this and I'm not that, that I again, that I need to be completely analyzed and deconstructed according to me. For example, sometimes that I can mean a lot during the day itself. In the morning I can feel that I am the best thing in this world. And the evening I can feel I'm the worst thing in this world. Or I can think that in the morning, I'm just like a flower or something. I'm just trying to give some metaphors. What I'm saying is that I itself is so overflowing and dynamic. We don't know what exactly that I. But then what is unchanging is the self-awareness. You are saying that I am something. That ability to point to oneself using one's own awareness, I feel that is just magnificent. We just don't understand what is that mechanism.
I'm saying that concept is seen as some kind of I don't know that intelligence is the right word.
Yeah.
That seems to be sort of necessary.
Yeah, if we have to, bring in intelligence as a kind of a theological god, that every time we have to bring in, in that sense, then I can say intelligence. But why again the word intelligence? That's why my whole critique was on the word intelligence,
Some people also say that because this first-person authority is immediate. So it doesn't because self-evident, because this is something only when I articulate in the language, then I say that there is function, that it is different from the object. But as we know that even from this argument of Shushupti and even in Indian philosophy, but even if we don't take that, so even the first person knowledge is very immediate, because I don't require any proof that I exist. That is what Descartes' famous statement is that. So that is immediate, and I think this doesn't require any proof, because that will be then. But because if it requires that I exist, then it will be contradiction then.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about proof. I'm just saying that there could be a meeting point of intelligence and awareness. Intelligence is not the right word, but it seems to me that being self-aware already requires a distinction between two things,
So can I interpret your question in the way, if I get it properly, that this self-awareness requires some higher, it to be attested through some other mechanism? Is that what?
No.
Okay.
I'm just saying that there already seems to be a power of distinction.
Yeah.
That's what I meant. That power.
Yeah.
Maybe this one doesn't have a power.
Yes.
Maybe this one doesn't have the power to distinguish between the self and the non-self.
Yeah, I
was
think.
just trying to say, and can that be a placeholder for intelligence? I was just thinking from that point of view.
I think that is a very valid point, because that is the thing. Because if you can't distinguish, so how can you be aware of the self?
There are challenges to that. There are psychiatric cases where you misplace your own body parts for somebody else's body parts. Yeah, so there are cases like that, and but then can I say that they are not intelligent? I will not, because they are still making meaning of their lives, their disrupted lives, their disintegrated self. They might have a disintegrated self, but I'm not sure whether you can say they are less intelligent. In a certain sense, because that is not even a question of intelligence there. It's a question of difficulty to orient yourself to understand what you are. So there are psychiatric cases where you have experiences that, one of the famous is the hemispatial neglect, right? Aditi might know about it. So you ignore the left side as it is not belonging to you. Yeah. So you complete the clock on one side, you complete the daisy on one side. So what does that mean? So it is half of it's not being self-aware, So these are difficulties, and these are happening due to neural dysfunctions or, combined with other psychiatric implications, etc., etc. So this is much complex. But one question I wanted to ask to whomever is why this obsession with the word intelligence?
Okay, obsession with the word intelligence.
Partly historical. I think it's historical, right?
IQ tests and
So that is right. Yeah.
Yeah, partly it's historical probably, right? Because IQ tests have been there for a very, very long time.
And also cultural also depends, I guess, historical and cultural impact. That's what I think. Stoic in 1 second.
No, all our examination, for example,
Correct,
right?
correct.
You have to pass your examination, you have to get a certain grading,
Yeah.
and all the test is basically based on intelligence, right? Ability to write some questions in a prescribed time and so on. But how about giving a scenario and checking your own emotional response to that? How differently we emotionally respond to a situation? You know, these are all. That is why I feel our assessment is just one way or one minuscule part of human personality, and it is ignoring a whole lot, you know, because humans have very different ways of responding to different things, and always everything is not logical and intelligent. Many times it is
It's beyond rational thinking.
It is beyond rational thinking.
Trying to understand Professor Nitin's question, that intelligence, of course, one is the historical baggage associated with that. But if we take the intelligence as the basic capacity to distinguish between, say, self and non-self, that even to say that I exist, so it already assumes that I am able to distinguish from certain things, certain non-self thing, that I am not this object and I am not this. So, can we understand intelligence as some kind of the basic fundamental capacity, because that is necessary, because if you don't have certain fundamental capacity like between self and the other, even I can doubt that this is not my body. Even there are other cases of thought theft, that my ideas are not mine, but even to say that my ideas are not mine, I am assuming there is something like me, which has to be distinguished from something from the other, and so this fundamental capacity, I think, is basic, this distinction between the self and other, because if we dissolve that, then how can one operate? This is just a question.
So the other question I wanted to raise in this context again is that all these statements or self-declarations of I am this and I am not that is primarily based on the feeling of our body, which is already embodied, which means we have a mind. How about extending that scenario when you do not have a mind, which happens in psychiatric illnesses, or at least you have partial ability, which are usually identified with mind in psychiatric contexts or brain impairments. That's number one. Number two is, how about extending the scenario when you don't even have a body?
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, 1 second, when you say we don't have a mind, thinking is also not there, right?
No, when you don't have a mind, part of the mind. Right?
Okay.
Because the part of in psychiatric issue, in psychiatric context, and also in certain brain impairments, we have, you know about the case that your mind is not whole there, right? It is not integrated. It is not the normal, the so-called normal mind. So that's in the context of mind. But how about the body? Let's say you don't have a body. Still, can I say I am this and I am not that? Yes, deep sleep, still I am a body, and then I get up from the deep sleep and then I say, right? I slept well.
Yeah, that's what we say.
I slept well.
Though we don't have the experience of the body of the bird.
No, we may not be, we don't know. We don't even know about it.
If you have sleep apnea, you will think that you have slept, right? But you have not slept. Only a machine which is measuring your state of sleep, because I have gone through that.
One thing that I wanted to say is that we are actually looking at distinguishing between self and not self. I mean, that we are considering if that could be intelligence is the speculation. So I was thinking that first of all, it will be enough to say that I am, because we cannot say anything of the not self. Because if I am is all I can say, I really cannot say anything of the not self. It could or could not be what I am. So in that sense, I think that the point would be to first know who, like, I am, and if someone can know that, that could be a point of starting rather than distinguishing between self and not self.
So there are lots of philosophical discussions, and you can have two different stances based on what you said. So one is saying that what I am, in very clear distinction to what I am not. Right? For that, you have to come to a reflective analysis where you realize that all that which you think you are can be actually avoided. They are not so essential. And then you come to a certain point where you cannot even make a statement that I am without that. And that is considered to be a deeper level of awareness. So that is one. The other scenario is this exactly the opposite, where there is nothing called I am this and I am not that, because there is nothing which is not that which I am. So which I am everything. So the one is a kind of including, and there's no limit to inclusion. The other is limit to an exclusion, which is so minute that it has to be so minute that even the person who is doing that drops at that point. So, so the arrow can go both sides. Both reach the same. So that is why the whole binary is so difficult, because exactly as you said, the endpoint could be the same for that. And there are a lot of references in philosophical texts, to indicate this. And of course, a lot of discussion in the Upanishads, for example, Upanishadic literature of the Neti technique, and one is the Neti technique in general. But then there are also some of the Upanishadic texts which identify you with the grossest expression of consciousness, such as Annam. So you can have this movement back and forth, and that's why there is another statement which says kind of any practice of logic which is going linear in one way or this way need not be giving you the truth. The truth is actually looking at both and then taking a third way, which is we don't know where it comes from. yeah, exactly.
Any more comments, questions, ideas? You want to say something?
No, I learned a lot from this discussion, like about self-consciousness. Definitely what you all suggest is like we need to, maybe as Aditi Katpaya also suggested, like we need to understand the self first. Consciousness, what exactly who I am, then that might probably give a better direction to the AI also. That's what I think.
To ma'am, that I have understood that when I exclude something, because then that there is a qualia to that, because consciousness, what we understand in philosophy, and there is qualia and minus to attach to that. What I find difficult in comprehending. So that's that. Suppose if I include everything, then in that consciousness, I am the qualia is attached. That like.
So when I include everything, that I is not a pen or a phone, which is not an object, it's a subject, whose dimensionality is improving and changing all the time. So that is the whole feature of consciousness, that it has the ability to be the grossest, it has the ability to be the subtlest. So what you are asking is whether the subjectivity is lost, right? Can you just reframe that?
I think he's saying probably that will include everything. Is there subjectivity kind of like...
Then you lose your subjectivity when you include everything? Is that what you said?
Not as a personal identity, but as a condition of the consciousness which we understand.
No, that's a theoretical stance, right? What you're saying. We have to now analyze it in an experiential itself, right? I mean, theoretically, maybe then that discussion will go on.
Yeah.
But subject means, if in order to discuss subject, you have to stay with the subject, right? I cannot convert the subject into an object and then argue for the subjective nature of something, right? So if I have to argue for the subject, I need to preserve the subjective quality. Then only I can be true to the idea of subject, right? You're agreeing with what I'm saying. So there's, as you know, that there's a lot. So therefore, it's a kind of a delimiting factor here itself, that in order to understand subject, you need to be a subject. The moment you objectify the subject, then you are only understanding a particular expression of the subject and not the possibility of the subject. So that is why the possibility of the subject is too vast and unlimited. So whether the subjectivity is lost, even in a theoretical sense, as you include more, it depends upon what kind of subject you are at that point when you are making that question. So that is why it is a very, very self-centered, that question has to be self-centered, because it needs our own reflection. At what point would the subject lose its subjectivity if it starts including more? Okay, let's say I am just one person. I include my neighbor too in my awareness. So am I lost my subjectivity, or what do you mean by inclusion? So there the inclusion could be just in the level of day-to-day interaction, such as being nice to that person, or having an engagement with that person, sharing something with that person, learning from that person. That is what we mean by inclusion, right? So the inclusion is giving him a place and respect in your own consciousness. So I feel the problem sometimes with the exclusive philosophical discussion is that though we take a very high stand on what we mean by subject, I feel philosophy also runs into the problem of objectifying something which is so deeper and something which is so experiential, such as a subject. So that is why a philosopher has to be learning to also reflect and be within oneself, at the same time having the ability to analyze and and distinctly see what all elements are there in a particular theoretical stance. I don't know whether I am clear enough, but I tried hard.
I think I can add to this point. Think of dreaming and lucid dreaming. So in dreaming, I don't know that I'm the other. In lucid dreaming, in some sense, there is some qualia in terms of that I'm everything, right? Or I'm controlling the dream. I'm just saying, I don't know whether that is a good case to look at, dreaming and lucid dreaming. Both are, there are some commonalities but some differences also, right? Because in one case, I'm everything, right? I mean, not exactly, I don't know how to, but anyway, we can discuss this offline, I think.
Let me just say this one also, because this is one of my recent experience, and of course you all wouldn't know. Just a couple of days back, I happened to meet an elderly lady who is bedridden, and she suffers from dementia. I mean, she has completely lost her memory. She doesn't know who she is. So when you ask her the name, she cannot say her name. Of course, she doesn't know even who is talking, because in another second, she forgets. So she cannot relate to the other person. She doesn't even know who that person is. Can we say that person doesn't have a subject? At the same time, she is really trying hard to respond to some of the, gestures and so on. The other person is trying to show her, trying to have a relation with her, So she's smiling, and she's trying to see what you are saying. And then, but when we repeatedly ask her, what's your name? What's your name? No answer. She's thinking. Or she's just giving a blank look. So people who have acute dementia and absolute memory loss, do they have a subject? Where is their subject? So I feel they have a subject. It's just that they have lost a very important mechanism, which actually designates us as a human being in our cultural context. Because we are supposed to remember things. We are supposed to have long-term memory. We are supposed to have short-term memory. Then only you are a normal human being. Right? This person has just lost all that. But how can I say that she is not a person? How can I say that she doesn't have a self? She doesn't know what she is, this or that, neither of that. Of course, she may pay, I don't know whether she might be feeling hurt if you are, but then everything, she has to be completely taken care of. Right? She just wouldn't do anything supposed to be a normal person doing. But is she lacking a subject? I wouldn't think so. She does have a self, but then where is her self?
Similar to what I was talking about. When we talk about the consciousness, we always associate somehow, like knowingly or unknowingly, very spatio-temporal context. What beyond that? When you surpass the boundary of time, let's analyze the past, the people who has gone, or the people we found dead, somebody is dead. Then what we say that about the consciousness, what about the identity, self-subject? Can we say something about that beyond this spatio-temporal context? I don't know. I have no answer. I was just always, when I used to see a skeleton, anything like that, then we have to try to think that, wow. Only then, if you're able to do that, what is the beyond this, then we can go back and analyze something like what was there. So if artificial intelligence is making some kind of thing, then it will be a revolution, I think.
I just have one more sentence to maybe share with you, and with that I'll stop. I feel the more we are interested in understanding intelligence, the more empathic we need to be. We need to know the other person much more, because knowledge is an epithet of intelligence, right? By intelligence or using intelligent ways of understanding, you know. So if knowledge has to be true to oneself and to another person, we need to be empathic. You need to be in touch with the other person, things around you and what's going on around you. So which I feel empathy is the true factor or the closest factor which will perhaps make us super intelligent, if at all I use that word. Because the only way you can know what is happening around you is by being empathic. So it's very important for us to know what is that which makes us feel, for example. We all feel, right? What do we mean by feel? It looks like we almost taken for granted that we all know, but then we don't think about it. We all know that we know. But then have you thought about what is to feel? What is it to be feeling something? So, which means there are so many subtle, nuanced attributes of what is called as the self, which we have not analyzed or not understood because our mainstream education has not been fashioned in that way. We have been taught to think that we are selves defined by these number of limited factors. But if you go out of that, we are in trouble because we just don't know how to define it. And that is what I think we are facing when in the context of intelligence, because we just have a few factors and we just don't know outside what happens. So thank you.
So let's thank Hari for giving a very fascinating talk. And also thanks to all of you for engaging in very, very interesting conversations. And I'm sure that this will continue when we go outside also, these questions, these debates. So thank you Hari, and thank you all for coming. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.